Okay, so we are going to have the story of Hansel and Gretel. Once there was a woodcutter. He was very poor. One day he said to his wife, "What will become of us? We are so poor and we cannot feed the children." And his wife said, "We will take the children into the forest and leave them there. They must take care of themselves." Well, Hansel and Gretel were listening at the door. Gretel began to cry. "Oh, what will become of us?" she said. "Do not cry," said Hansel. "I will look after you." When it was dark, Hansel went to the garden and he filled his pockets with pebbles, and then he went to bed. The next day the woodcutter took the children into the forest. His wife gave them both a piece of bread. Hansel's pockets were full of pebbles, and Gretel had to put the bread in her apron. Hansel kept looking back at the house. "What are you looking at?" asked the woodcutter. "I am looking at my little cat," said Hansel, but really he was dropping pebbles on the path. When they were deep in the forest, the woodcutter made a fire. "Sit and rest," he said to Hansel and Gretel. "When we have cut the wood, we will come back for you." Hansel and Gretel waited and waited, and their father did not return, and at last they went to sleep. When Hansel and Gretel woke, it was dark. They were alone, and Gretel began to cry. "Oh, do not cry," said Hansel. "As soon as the moon rises, I will take you home." The moonlight shone on the pebbles Hansel had dropped on the path, and they followed them all the way home. Some days later, Hansel and Gretel heard their stepmother plotting again. When she was asleep, Hansel went to fill his pockets with pebbles. The door was locked. He could not get into the garden. Gretel began to cry. "Do not cry," said Hansel. "I will think of something." Next morning, their stepmother gave them both a piece of bread, and Hansel put the bread in his pocket. He broke it into crumbs. "Why do you always look back?" asked the woodcutter. "I am watching my pigeon," said Hansel, but really he was dropping crumbs along the path. The children were left as before. The moon rose. Hansel looked for the crumbs. Oh no, they were not there. The birds had eaten them. Now Hansel and Gretel were lost. 3 days passed. Then they saw a white bird. It wants us to follow it," said Hansel. Hansel and Gretel followed the bird. It led them to a house with walls made of gingerbread. It had a roof made of cake, and windows made of sugar. Yummy. Hansel and Gretel were hungry. They broke off a piece of the house and they began to eat. "Nibble, nibble like a mouse. Who is nibbling at my house?" said a voice. And the children thought it was the wind and took no notice. The door of the house opened and an old lady came out. The old woman asked them into the house. She gave them food to eat and a bed to sleep in. The children thought she was kind. She really was a witch. She had made the gingerbread house to trap children, and she ate children for dinner. Oh no! The witch shut Hansel in a stable. It had bars in the door. Then the witch woke Gretel. "Cook something for your brother," she said. "I want to fatten him up before I eat him." Gretel wept, but she had to do as she was told. Hansel was given the best food. Gretel was given the scraps. Every day the witch made Hansel put his finger through the bars, and every day Hansel held out a bone instead of a finger. And every day she said, "Not fat enough yet." Oh, so Hansel was pretty clever there. And one day the witch could wait no longer. "Fetch some water, girl, and fill the pot," she said. When that was done, she said, "Crawl into the oven, girl, and make sure it was hot." The witch was going to push Gretel into the oven. Gretel guessed what the witch was going to do. "I do not know how to get in the oven," she said. "Oh, silly girl," said the witch. "I will show you." And Gretel stood behind the witch. She pushed the witch into the oven and she closed the door. Oh no! It only took a moment to free Hansel. They filled their pockets with treasure from the witch's house. Then they set off to find their way home. A white duck took them part of the way. At last, they came to a part of the forest they knew. Soon they saw their own house. Oh, the woodcutter was very glad to see them. He told them their stepmother was dead. They sold the treasure, and the three of them lived happily ever after. All these appear in the pages of the story. The woodcutter, Hansel, Gretel, Pebbles, you bet, bread, bird, witch, gingerbread house. Use the pictures to tell the story in your own words and then draw your own pictures. Well, that might be a really fun thing to do. And then next time we are going to read about Town Mouse and Country Mouse. I hope you all enjoyed this. Love you so much.